Super excited about this topic. It is hosting fun and safe gatherings. Just as the things open back up, the governor has shared his plans to have people gathering again by July 4th. So as this all happens, our thoughts change to backyard gatherings and summer parties. Tonight, we're going to explore some ways to support safe gatherings where youth cannot access alcohol and cannabis. But first, we want to hear a little bit from you. So I want you each to think of a party or a gathering that you've gone to, and what is something kind of fun that you've done at that party that's made it memorable. So just think, and then just go ahead. We're a small enough group that you can just kind of unmute yourself and share.
For me, I've been to a lot of sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead, Brian.
Been to a lot of campfire parties, so maybe singing songs around the campfire, a lot of musician friends, or telling jokes, telling stories. Yeah, but being outside, doing that kind of thing.
Cool. Caitlin?
Kind of to go off that too, kind of, games like cornhole or something like that, and just kind of being outside with a campfire.
Yeah, games is a big one for us when we were in lockdown, especially, my 3 kids were here, and the 5 of us almost every night when the weather was good, we'd be outside playing some kind of game, whether it was we brought a ping pong table outside, we had cornhole toss, we had croquet, and just playing games. It's fun. You don't need substance, you don't need cannabis, you don't need alcohol to just laugh and giggle and have fun. And that's what we're trying to communicate to this generation.
I'll add in there. I don't think it was mentioned, but dancing, was it mentioned?
No, not yet.
Can be so much fun. And I was at just an outdoor gathering where people had big streamers, colorful, and people were just dancing kind of spread apart also, with using the streamers and I don't know what you call it, but it was so much fun to just and it was so colorful and vibrant, and just it was an added element.
Very cool. And I think back to my own adolescent years, and a lot of our gatherings really centered around capture the flag, especially for bigger groups, or hide and seek. My son loves Nerf battles. So that active component is definitely something that we can consider as we're putting together parties and gatherings. And now that we spent a little bit of time, on some ideas, and I'm sure each of you who's watching this has your own. I'm going to spend a little bit of time taking thinking about how we can make sure that the gatherings that we host, whether or not they're for youth, are safe for youth. Because, as most often there are youth present at our family gatherings, at our parties, whether they're friends of our kids or whether the party is for kids. So it's really important to take into account our youth population. And the other piece I want you to think about is, are there community gatherings, and how do we make those safe, just as we kind of go through this. So first of all, we want to note that Vermont has a social hosting law where it's illegal to sell or serve alcohol or cannabis to minors under 21. And this includes hosting intentionally or unintentionally on your land. If you're an adult, you are responsible for the property that you oversee and the youth on that property. You can also be held responsible if you have adult guests who are at your house and they overconsume and get in a car and drive and get in an accident. So we really want to be mindful and prevent the negative impacts of substance misuse. Our first tip, when starts before the party starts. So really think about putting together and hosting, a positive party. And if it's a youth party, we really encourage you to round up, a few other parents to kind of co-host. This will ensure that you have adequate supervision and that the needs of those attending your party are met. So as I mentioned, a safe party starts way back in the planning process. So set the stage early. If you may want to consider using invites, make it kind of an RSVP only, so that way who's coming. This is good for lots of different reasons. It helps with the planning, just to make sure that you have enough, food and snacks on hand, enough marshmallows for s'mores. Another thing, in talking to a lot of parents that have teens, is they like to provide the drinks, so that way they control that portion. So often, alcohol could be kind of brought in backpacks and such. So some parents have a no backpack rule, and others just say, you know what, you can provide the snacks. We're going to provide all of the drinks. When we have host parties, we make a huge pitcher of lemonade just in a big glass jar and have that on the table. Also, you can use this time to really set the tone if you're choosing to have a substance-free party. And we highly recommend that if you have youth there, or if the party is for youth, like a birthday party, that you really do make it substance-free. Most of the adults that are attending, they can go a couple hours without a beer or a glass of wine. You can provide some nice seltzers or some things for them as well. And then we also encourage you to know the majority of those attending. This was a tip given by some friends that have 4 teenagers that are all grown up now, and that was just really their advice, is know who's coming. And that doesn't mean that your teens can never bring a friend that you don't know, but just kind of have an idea of who's going to be there. The other important thing is to involve your teens in the planning process, or your kids if they're younger. What are the things that they like to do? What are those activities? And really provide a variety of activities, but also kind of talk about what are the house rules. When we have groups of people, our bedrooms are off limits. And upstairs is often off limits depending on the gathering. Especially during COVID, you could make it an outside gathering, so you're really you set the tone right from the start. Also, you may want to set some guidelines on cleanup. If you're hosting a party for your teens, are they going to help clean up at the end of the night, or is it your job as the parent? So these are just some of the things that you can kind of think about as you plan. Also, one of the big topics, and the reason we're hosting this workshop, is to think about alcoholic beverages. The safest option is to make your event alcohol-free. But we recognize that that's not always a possibility, or the choice that everybody wants to make. But we do recommend that you provide all the drinks for youth at the parties, and that you include, make those, that you use containers versus open cups. It's just safer that way. Cans of seltzer, cans of soda. That way you have, closed containers versus wide open. If you do choose to have a party for mixed stages where alcohol is present, clearly have 2 separate drink locations and coolers. Put the alcohol drinks at one end of the table, put the youth drinks at the other end, and really think about that it's not just about the youth, right? There's a lot of adults that don't like to drink alcohol for lots of different reasons. And if you have alcohol present, enlist other adults to help you monitor it. I was at a gathering last year where one of the dads sat on the hard seltzer cooler, so that way there was no chance that youth at the party were going to accidentally get one. And ensure that there are designated drivers for the adults if somebody does appear to be drinking too much. And then again, remember, not everyone, not every adult drinks alcohol. Their reasons are their own, and provide alternatives. That's just being a good host, is to think about everyone who may be attending. And then the next subject is food. It's food is often a big part of our parties and gatherings and celebrations. Do you potluck? Do you provide it? Or do you assign different people that are coming different things? One of the big considerations, especially now that cannabis is a legal adult use substance, is that can easily be put into baked goods. And so, you might want to consider, if you're going to have, sweets that you provide them, or choose another parent that is going to not include that. So those are things that are really important considerations when hosting a party or gathering. So now you get to the night of or the day of. One of the things that you can do is really just welcome guests. That way who's present, and you can kind of see their affect when they're coming in. Somebody coming to your gathering, where they may have already been, using substances beforehand. So you can really kind of pay attention to who's present. Also, if it's a youth that are coming, you can also, if they're bringing drinks, you can kind of check and say, what's in your cooler, and just kind of take a dig through that cooler and confirm that it is all non-alcoholic beverages. And so the other piece is, we talked about this at a welcome, is just really thinking about who is coming and providing fun activities that the guests will want to do. It's important for adults to monitor good physical activity, but to also show that we can have fun without using alcohol or drugs. And then check in regularly with the especially if it's a youth party. And activity is a great way to do that. Jump into that volleyball game, or board game. Come out with a bowl of snacks. You can be present without being, lurking over their shoulder. But we want our youth to have fun and to be safe. And depending on the environment, we can sometimes be part of that fun. So another piece that is a little more serious is thinking about safety plans. Supervision and crowd control. It's important to kind of, if you're having a party, and that's part of the reason of doing RSVPs, is your space, how much that you can kind of monitor safely. So kind of set those limits in advance. Also think of medical emergencies. Do you have a well-stocked first aid kit? Is it on hand? Watch the weather. Are there thunderstorms moving in? Do you have a location where you could move people inside? Also, especially with youth, but it's really with anybody, is interpersonal, especially, interact with your guests, make sure they're okay. If somebody seems to be isolated, check out and see how they're doing. If it's a gathering that you have alcohol, or that they consume too much, are they okay? And that's if it's someone over 21 or under 21, because there are cases where youth do access alcohol. And then also think of exit strategies. How do you end your party? Do you have a set time limit for your party? That's something that's a good consideration, especially with younger drivers as our teens get older, but are still new drivers, getting them home at a safe hour. But also, what are your considerations for if something does get out of hand? It's better to make a call to the local police or local sheriff's department. If somebody shows up with a keg, than it is to just ignore it and potentially have a medical situation, or somebody getting on the road having had too much alcohol. But also, the other piece of exit strategies is, if your youth feel uncomfortable, for any reason at the party, they need to have a way to come let you know that something's happening, that they can feel safe as well. So the end of the event is just as important as the beginning. Just as you greeted your guests as you come, make sure you say goodbye. Make sure you know who's getting into whose car, and that they have permission to do so, especially if they're youth. And just ensure that they're safe to drive. Also, if it's a party with alcohol, clean up promptly so there aren't partials or empties laying around after. I hear a lot of stories over the years of, youth who, that's how they first got their first sip, was they were curious, and, their parents had a party the night before and there were a lot of half bottles just kind of sitting out by the fire pit. And so that's just a really easy thing that you can do if you're hosting a party with alcohol, is make sure that you clean up and dump those things properly. So that's parties that you host, and there's lots of other considerations for parties that you host that you can, we can do a little bit more group dynamic discussion here in a moment. But there's also this is the time of year that we go to others' parties and gatherings, both as a family, youth on their own, or gatherings in the community. And so there's a few tips that we've compiled, and I'm sure that you all have some more that we would like to hear. Especially if it's a party that you're dropping your youth off to, check with the host beforehand, make sure they're going to be there, make sure that they also have the same value of not having youth have alcohol and drugs. What steps are they taking? Give a call, walk your youth to the door. If it's somebody that you don't know, it's really important for parents to connect with other parents. Also, be the one that sends a cooler full of, non-alcoholic beverages. If you have a teen, what do they like? Do they like Izzy's? Do they like, bubblies? So there's lots of different seltzer options, as that can be healthy, or juice flavored sodas, or cooler full of Cokes is better than a cooler full of alcohol. So what are their favorite drinks, and send them with those. If you're at a gathering that does have, alcohol, be an adult that kind of monitors that. You don't have to be the, alcohol police, but stay near it. Make sure youth aren't accessing it. Recruit a few other parents there. That could also help keep an eye on it. Hey, I noticed there's a cooler, over there that has alcohol, and it's kind of near the edge of things. Let's kind of make a pact to kind of keep an eye on it, so that youth can't access it. And if you do see a youth trying to, pocket a bottle in their hoodie, you just kind of go over and say, hey, can I have that back, please? And just send a really clear message that that it's being watched and it's not for them. And then again, this idea of exit strategy. We always try to do this with our kids, that if they're at somewhere and they're not feeling comfortable, that they can either just come hang out with us, or they can kind of let us know that they're not feeling well, or, they're not comfortable with something, and always provide a way for them to get out of an uncomfortable situation. And it's important to note that uncomfortable situations don't always have alcohol or drugs present. Sometimes it's a social situation that's going on that may be unhealthy. So give them a way to check in with you about that. And at this point, let's, now it's kind of your turn. We'd love to hear, your thoughts. We're not going to break out into breakout rooms, but these are sort of the topics: advanced planning, during party safety, exit strategies, or parties that you attend but don't host. So I'm actually going to stop the screen share. We can kind of go more into discussion. And welcome, Floyd. We're glad you joined us.
I'll start. Jessica, really well done presentation. I was thinking about, especially with, parties that that I might attend, or even community-wide, or at another family's home, where folks maybe don't have the prevention lens that some of us on this call do have, and just mentioning something sometimes can make a huge difference. Like I've been places where even with my own partner saying, you know, maybe we can move the alcohol and, you know, take a look at this space, and like how would a young person, you know, see this, and you know, how can we have like separate spaces if there is alcohol at an event, a community event, or you know, just, and sometimes people say, oh, I never thought of it. Oh, sure, go ahead. You know, I think that some of it is part of just having those conversations with where the people that are hosting or the people you're organizing with, who may not have the you know, may not have considered it before, and this is an opportunity for, you know, a teachable moment, or you know, a learning that can be followed up on.
Those are great points. Thanks for sharing that.
I like the idea, and I'm gonna tap you in, Brian, just because you mentioned your different ways of saying like how to say no, like having that exit strategy, and would love to kind of hear more about that and like what I guess those methods are that you teach the kids.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Brian, do you want to share that?
I could definitely share that. Yeah, so really, you know, there are a lot of methods, but I kind of use this outline called STOP, which is S is to say no in your own way, and there's, you know, many ways you can do that, but it's really just like how you say no. You can say no, thank you, and then it's also good to like practice your assertive communication. The T in STOP stands for tell a reason or tell an excuse why you won't use. And these are good if you like think of ahead of time. So like we brainstormed reasons when I did the workshop, and then I also gave them some like common pressure lines that someone might say like to get you to use, and like, okay, like what's a good response to that? And then the O is offer an alternative activity, or you can even like change the subject too. And then P is promptly leave, find an exit strategy, which Jessica kind of talked about. But yeah, that can be, you know, texting your parent like a code word or something that you plan ahead of time, or just like walking away, you know, whatever makes sense in that situation. And then also, you know, like avoiding the situations in general, because like sometimes you do have ideas, like certain situations, you'll know there'll be substances, or you think that they may be present, and just like avoiding those situations and like bringing friends that don't use with you, like power in numbers also helps too a lot. So those are some of the strategies we talked about.
We had a speaker a few years ago, and he had the Aunt Sally or Uncle Mike, you know, strategy, where that was a code word. There really wasn't an Aunt Sally or Uncle Mike, but if the student asked their parent or called their parent and said, hey, is Aunt Sally coming over today? You know, that he would show up, no questions asked, to pick up his kids from that party. And as soon as they get in the car, he would say, is there anybody else inside who needs to get out of that situation? And so there's definitely, you know, that's the other piece, is we want to teach our kids that if others are in trouble, that's important too. And in Vermont, you can call and report an incident of underage drinking. So if you know there's a party, that can be done anonymously, or even reported ahead of time. I'm working with our law enforcement. You know, if they know there's going to be an underage drinking party and they get that address in advance, they'll go knock on the doors and say, you know, we heard this is going to happen. You know, we have social hosting laws, and you need to not have this party, or to have it without alcohol. So our police department is a willing partner to be proactive in that, because it's a lot easier to curb a party before it starts than to clean one up afterwards. And it's a lot safer for our youth. Great question, Caitlin. Other thoughts?
I kind of had a question too. So with regards to smoking, both in terms like cigarettes, marijuana, vaping, what kind of responsibility would you think the host plays in like letting, like this is a more adult youth party, obviously. Like how does the host address that beforehand so that they're not smoking pot like just right in front of the kids and the smoke's like billowing like right around youth. Like how do you address that?
Yeah, and that could be really, really tricky. That's a great question. I think, knowing who's going to be at your party is one piece of that. If you know that you have people coming that they like to use both either tobacco or marijuana, that you would talk to them in advance and say, hey, there's going to be kids here. So we're not going to do that around the campfire where kids are. Set that clear expectation in advance. I think is probably the easiest and probably most non-confrontational way. It's also, if that's not an option, perhaps having two separate campfires, as long as the youth campfire is also being monitored, or creating a designated smoking area, kind of, out of the way behind the house. I know family dynamics may come into play there, but we do know the harms of secondhand smoke are relevant. And, same with vaping. That's a lot harder to kind of monitor, but yeah. And if anybody else has thoughts on that, feel free to share.
I have a thought. Just that all of these moments don't have to be done in a way that's not, it could be very transparent and can be opportunities for conversations with our kids. They're really conversation starters. I see it in a way, even if my kids are 10 and younger, but I regularly will say something, or they'll say something to me, so and so smoking, or or I don't. I think as you have more conversations, those smaller conversations over time, it leads to kind of it could lead to a family consensus in a way of, okay, well, how do we deal with this together, including the youth in the conversation? What do you want to do or propose? How can we move through this and use it as, or maybe if you haven't had a conversation with your kids about it, maybe it's an opportunity to just to notice first and then to build on the conversation, as time goes on.
Yeah, and that's all. A lot of this is raising awareness and building, because you want to maintain those relationships, and it should be a positive. And on the line of parents building relationships and conversation opportunities with your youth, there's the parentupvt.org website from the Department of Health, and it's really a great resource for having, scanning it and then being prepared for those conversations and those opportunities as they come up.
And Jessica has written some really wonderful blogs on the topic that it's never too young to start talking to your kids, and even early elementary, preschool. It's still, there's a great blog on the Healthy Lamoille Valley website that relates to that.
Thank you. Allison just brought up a point, and it's never too young, but it's actually never too late either. We have Deb is on the call with us, and she has college age kids. And Deb, we'd love to hear from you. Some lessons learned, but also how do you relate to your older kids?
Okay, there. It's the same. You can certainly have more serious conversations because the risks are there, especially on college campuses, all over the country. Because of COVID, certainly there was less gathering and less parties, but that's all starting up again. So, it's really just about keeping the lines of communication open and always talking about, please be safe. You're not of age. It's dangerous. It affects your brain. Just it's constant. It really is. But I mean, as far as parties are concerned, and I think the slides that you did, I thought were really good. I thought they were spot on. I think it's really important for adults to have friends and colleagues who will come over and who are on the same page as you. I do think in our community, particularly in my community where it's such a tourist community, you have a lot of people who just feel very differently. They think it's okay. It's they're at my house. I can control everything. I can monitor it. I take the keys away. So it gets tricky. It really does.
And Deb, I'd share right there, we just completed our parent and community survey, and we're actually next month's coalition meeting, we'll be sharing those results out. But just a sneak peek is that, one of the questions on there was, are you okay with other parents providing alcohol for your youth, at their home? And, and the same with cannabis or marijuana. And, 100% of the respondents said, no, we are not okay with other parents providing alcohol to our kids. And so that just tells me that, while there sometimes are these attitudes of, oh, if it's safe, if it's here, it's safe and others will be okay with it, is that the majority of parents really aren't okay with it. And we recognize that our survey didn't survey every parent, but in general, the majority of the parents, and that was a pretty clear majority. That was the only question I think that got 100% of the respondents on the same page, is that parents don't want their kids to use alcohol before they're of age, and because they know it's going to impact their future. And that's a really great segue into how to have these conversations with our youth, is what are your future goals and plans, and that substances really do impact future plans. So I'm going to just run through these real quick, and if you have thoughts, jump in. Any other additions to advanced planning, kind of being, that you would want to share with others who might be planning a party? Things to think about, your experiences.
I do think it's hard to have an alcohol-free party, as much as probably all of us on this call would love to have an alcohol-free party. What's 2 hours? What's 3 hours? It's no big deal. But I can remember back when my kids were in high school and we hosted, and I asked people to please not drink until the kids leave. It was a pre-prom party. And so I don't know, there were probably 100 people here. And I said, no alcohol until the kids leave. And people were literally chomping at the bit to open up that alcohol. They could not contain themselves. And finally I had to give in. It was like a mutiny. So, so it was probably not a good idea on my part to say no alcohol until the kids leave. I think it should have been, I think you have to be reasonable and probably have one area where the alcohol is and the adults are, and then another area where the non-alcoholic drinks are and where the kids are. So.
And having clear sight lines, I think, between the two, even if, not right next to each other, but, so that if adults are stepping away from that you can kind of see, but you can also still monitor the area where the youth are too,
Right.
is important. So they're not, down in the back 40s somewhere. So Floyd, I just see that you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I want to tell a bunch of stories, but I'm going to avoid that. I will say my two daughters and I, we had a deal. We had a code word and they used it. And it was pretty effective, I think. I actually got a call from Antioch, Ohio from my oldest, where she called me and used the code word. And I said, you want me to fly? What do you want me to do? She said, no, I just need to leave this party. And the excuse is I got a phone call from my dad. So it's a skill that they use over and over again.
Yeah.
And we had a party once where we had one parent sneaking alcohol to their kid.
Oof.
Yeah.
Which was stunning. I couldn't figure out what that was about, but
Yeah, and it's, both that story and Deb's story really do illustrate, that alcohol really is a major part of the culture, and it's working slowly to change those norms, and it does take time, Deb, you sent a clear message, to those parents, and I know it wasn't well received, but that we need to wait, and, some of those parents, because it was a larger gathering, may think about it next time, like, oh, there was a reason she did that. And so I think that goes to what Allison mentioned earlier, of just building that readiness, but just really ensuring that youth aren't accessing it. And those who do are not. Those who are over 21 don't get behind the wheel if they're too intoxicated. So good. During party safety, is there anything that anybody would sort of like to add, to the slides? If we're doing this again, the goal is actually to put together a tip sheet. Deb, you had asked, how do we get this out into the community? And so we're going to put together a tip sheet on hosting safe parties, or a series of tip sheets. So what should be on those? Are there other during party safety things that we missed?
Hey, Jess, can I add something before Allison starts? It was kind of like tying into what we just talked about, is like, I think adults alcohol as a social lubricant is a huge factor. And like a lot of people, like, you get into these party situations and you're anxious and you want to like take the edge off, you want to loosen things up. So I think having the idea of having like games and making it so people can feel relaxed and not have to be like, okay, we need to socialize, we need this lubricant in order for things to like not feel awkward and weird. Like, I think having what you said about the games and like whatever like makes it more comfortable for those people, I think.
Yeah. I think that's a really valid point. We have, we know there's introverts and extroverts, and a lot of people just aren't comfortable in social settings. And even if they know the host well, they might not know the other people at the party well. So providing opportunities for people to sort of, casually get to know each other through a common experience, whether that's cornhole or, a scavenger hunt or volleyball or just kind of, sitting quietly by the campfire, providing that variety of types of activities, a chessboard sitting off to the side, can be a really good opportunity to provide somebody a safe way to kind of be at the party, but not feel like that social awkwardness. So acknowledging that in your planning is really important. Great point, Brian. Allison, you look like you also.
Yeah, this is something that sometimes we talk about with our alcohol licensees or for events, but we talk about lighting or signage, just so that people know where things are and what's what, and they can see. These are all things we can consider where our placement of where things are, and consider when we're hosting parties, especially if they're outside and it's dark. I also thought about the water element, just the danger of being near water if, especially if intoxicated in any way, and recognizing like some boundaries around the spaces.
That's a great point. The physical space has so much to do with it as well, and the safety of the party, and lighting and clear labeling. And the labeling is something actually that we're working on as a coalition. We have a parent work group that meets on the fourth Wednesday of each month. So you're all invited. And, it's one of our first projects is actually a cooler sticker project. And I know Caitlin's particularly interested in that. And, at our first meeting, we selected couple sets of designs that people, that would be appealing, that people would want to put on their coolers, but also wouldn't really stigmatize the kiddie cooler, because we want people to feel like, that's drinks for everyone, that's, you don't have to be a kid to go over there. And that's part of, being a host, a good host, is making sure everybody feels comfortable. And so having that clear designation, whether it's a sticker or a decal or a magnet, that you can put on your cooler or that you can print up and put on your drink table. It's really important. And Deb actually had the brilliant idea to provide those to caterers as well, so that they could access those, because that's a real issue for catering. You brought up the businesses, and the lighting, but also caterers have those alcohol licenses, and they don't want to serve to minors as well. So really, really great points. Anything anybody wants to add? We did go back and circulate to exit strategies, but anything that anybody else would like to add to that real quick? Oh, having food. Yes, having food is a great, thing that keeps people, excited and engaged in the party. You don't want hangry guests. And Caitlin, your hand is raised, or was raised. We can circle.
So first, sorry, I had to turn my camera off. The dog is destroying the house. So had to be chasing him around. But I really like the idea of, just making people not only comfortable, like you said, that you don't have to rely on that alcohol, but again, not stigmatizing that, oh, you're not drinking, so, that's the kids' cooler. And, just really making that, again, all ages, where it can kind of be that broad-based, whoever wants to, not partake in alcohol and whatever, cannabis, that they also feel comfortable and supported.
Yeah, great point. And Allison, I saw that you just put in the chat, and maybe this is why you're raising your hand, of I think it's related to the food and having food on hand, to offset the impacts of alcohol. Also having plenty of water on hand is another strategy that I know that for harm reduction, it's often shared at the college level, is, alternate your drinks, if you're at a party and you are drinking. And so making sure that there's opportunity for people to use that strategy. Was that what you were going to raise your hand? Was it related to food?
Yeah, that was one thing for sure. And the other was just thinking about, to have the conversation about mocktails. I know that sometimes when we see that, sometimes we can think of it as that it actually norms alcoholic beverages for our youth when they're offered mocktails as youth. But on the other hand, in an adult setting, or a more adult setting, how mocktails may be an alternative for folks who don't want to drink. And so I'm wondering, your take, or just to share about in this kind of setting, what, how to address that, because it seems relevant, like if you have your big lemonade with like fancy glasses or whatever it is, how do folks look at that, and what do they take in, and what are we norming or learning, or how does it help substance-free part?
Yeah, and there's a really big movement actually with our young adults who actually don't have any interest in drinking, but they do like the idea of having special drinks and mocktails. And, there's actually whole restaurants and dry bars that are being set up because they want the social, but they don't want the alcohol. And so it definitely does give it a way out. I think it's how you frame it, we'll do special sodas that are not, alcoholic, where we take, fun juices and seltzer and mix them. We're not serving them in wine glasses, we just serve them in the regular cups, so I think it's how do you norm that? How do you speak about it? It's, is it the adults are getting their special drink and the youth are getting their how do you, that can really set up the norm of like, okay, this is what you have when you're youth, but when you're adults, you're gonna, switch over to alcohol. So, how do you frame that? I think is probably key. And if anybody else has thoughts on that, it is kind of one of those gray areas.
I think for older kids, I don't know, just in my personal experience, it makes it fun.
Yeah.
Like a couple of my kids made simple syrup with strawberries and blackberries and blueberries, and so they were making up some mocktails, and it gives them something to do. It's interesting. um you know
I would second that. So, Allison, I think you were actually on the DLC call earlier.
I
But
was. This is where it's coming from.
yeah, but Rolf from Brattleboro was talking about how, the kids kind of got involved with creating mocktails and then, voting, and maybe a restaurant would serve that mocktail. So it was kind of like an incentive to get involved, get creative, but also be substance free.
Right, and get it on the menu at a restaurant he was
Right.
talking about. So there was an option that was a non-alcoholic option. Mhm.
that's a
Yeah,
great
so
idea.
I think it's really cool for sure.
Yeah, and the restaurants bring up a whole other issue, and I know that my daughter in particular, and she would not be upset with me sharing this because she's shared it out before. One of her biggest frustrations is how when you first sit down, you're given the drink menu, and it's almost like alcohol is being pushed on your table and your family. And she would love to see that not be the case, that, it's there if people want to order it, but it's not the first thing, and, we recognize that that's often how, the food industry survives, but also, it's not just youth. There are people in recovery that have to like face this, and so it's how do we create safe and supportive community environments for anybody who wants that, and our youth. So. And that kind of brings to the last discussion topic of, parties or community events that you attend, but you don't host. And Allison had shared earlier about, even possibly pulling the host aside and saying, hey, is there any way we could put the drinks in 2 separate coolers? Or can we put those the alcohol cooler on the other end of the table versus, right next to the cooler with the Cokes, so what are the things that you can do in a micro level, or we could do at a kind of a bigger level, macro level, just to kind of change those community norms over time to create safer environments for our youth?
So for me, I had mentioned to Jessica in kind of collaborating on this water cooler sticker idea of keeping the drink separate, that we're planning on passing the information out at like the checkpoints the sheriffs do, just to kind of, spread that information. They're stopping anyway. And I mean, I hadn't even heard of or thought of the idea until Jessica mentioned it a few weeks ago. And so really just bringing that awareness campaign of, oh, hey, maybe we should do that, I think is a good first start.
Yeah. Bringing this into the general public's awareness, because so often people don't even think about this unless somebody brings it up. So.
I think even like when you go to a summer music series, when maybe it's not right, it's a community event, no one's hosting, but maybe a few families are gathering together and sharing food and drinks. And so I think that's just another another variable, it's another space that's no one family is necessarily responsible for, but all are in a sense, and it's within a community event. So there's so many layers to consider in those cases. But I've been part of plenty of situations where we're in a community space where there's just a lot going on, and there we aren't thinking about, or haven't been as much, all of these layers of the youth, or the youth access, and how do we get the information out there at those events.
Yeah. And it's not uncommon to attend a summer concert series and have, somebody, with a full cooler, and it's full of alcohol, at least in our region. So, how is that monitored? But also, are you bringing something special for your kids to drink too? Sometimes there's food provided or, for sale at some of these, or not, but, when you, like, if you're the mom that forgets to bring the drinks, which is, me at times, or, we often reuse our reusable water bottles, and it's like, if it seems like everybody else is drinking something that's fun, can we, still use our reusable water bottles, but make good lemonade at home. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, or do we splurge and let them buy a drink from a vendor, at that occasion. So just kind of being mindful before you go to those, if you have younger kids, juice boxes, or bottled iced teas, what are the things that you can just have on hand, so it's not I don't have anything to drink and that person's sitting over there drinking, that can also be a tricky situation to kind of navigate. So
I have a question, because I
Yeah.
haven't really attended a lot of the Lamoille area community events. So I was wondering, like, what about smoking? Like, what are the policies, and do people follow those policies regarding cigarette, marijuana smoke?
So general policy, at least for cannabis, marijuana, is that it's not acceptable in public places in the state. Like, that's a state statute when it was legalized. Does that mean that you never smell it? No, it's there. So the general public for that one is pretty, at least at our community concerts, is relatively mindful of that. The tobacco is definitely more prevalent. A lot of our community parks don't necessarily have that as a policy, which is a concern, because secondhand smoke, we know, is not healthy, as well as the sort of environmental impacts. And I know, Brian, you've done some research recently on the environmental impacts of both vaping devices and tobacco products. And so, that's certainly a concern. We have the prevention toolkit that was completed last year and is available on our website. That's a really great tool for community members to kind of come around and have those conversations. We find that parks that do have a no smoking, no vaping are less likely to have people in gatherings, using those substances. But also parks that have those policies, it gives those who are not wanting to be exposed to that a really easy, non-confrontational way just to kind of slide over and say, excuse me, this park is tobacco free. Could you at least bring that up to the edge of the, outside the crowded area? You might not ask them to totally put it away, or you may, depending on the situation. But at least, is that community empowerment piece to empower the community to kind of, make that choices and reduce use. So great question. So we are about nearing the end of time. Does anybody have anything burning that they really want to make sure that they say before we end? If you do, just unmute yourself. I'm going to share my screen one more time because there's a couple of upcoming opportunities that I want to share. So next week is National Prevention Week, and on Healthy Lamoille Valley's website, as well as their social media. There'll be a daily challenge. We know that there's a lot of great prevention information out there, but we also know that, it's still, a lot of people don't know about it. And so, so each day there's going to be a new prevention resource that gets shared, and we're encouraging people to kind of click on that, check it out. And then at the end of the week, there's going to be a survey that people can enter, just kind of as to say we completed the challenge, share one thing from each website, and then be entered to win a $25 gift certificate to a local merchant. So that's happening next week for National Prevention Week. Also, we have the Lamoille Area Youth Council, which Brian coordinates, and that meets monthly, and we'd love to have increased youth involvement in that. If you're interested, email Brian, BRIAN, at healthylamoillevalley.org, and he will respond.
It's also, oh, sorry to interrupt, but it's
go
also
ahead.
it's also youth council at healthylamoillevalley.org now.
Okay. Awesome. Youth Council at healthylamoillevalley.org. That's awesome. We have a parent work group. Deb, would you like to share anything about the parent work group? I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit. That meets the fourth Wednesday of each month.
I'm just unmuting myself. Yeah, sure. It's just a parent work group that meets once a month. And right now we're really just talking about like lessons learned from over the years of for me, I've raised 3 kids. They're all out of high school now, but some are young adults out of college and others are still in college. And yeah, it's just, I think it'll be a great group. It's lessons learned, but also Q&A. What are people struggling with? What are people curious about? And it's just an open dialogue, an open forum.
With some action steps too, like as things emerge, there'll be different projects like the Cooler Project
Yes,
that
absolutely.
kind of undertake as a group. So that's an emerging group. We had our first meeting actually in April. So we're super excited to see where that goes as it grows and evolves. And thank you, Deb, for co-facilitating that with me. And then also is the tobacco task force has a meeting upcoming. And Allison, would you like to share about that and where that's going?
Sure. It's a tobacco prevention task force. And so really looking at the next, into the next year, how we address our new work plan starting July 1. And everyone's welcome to come and be part of honing in on our projects and initiatives that we're working on. And especially we're looking at youth vaping prevention, looking at curriculum that have been implemented this year in our schools and that are expanding to other schools and other types of programming. And there are just so many layers of it between vaping and the intersection of tobacco and cannabis that just bringing the coalition together and people who work in the field across our region, but also people who are interested and care about the topic. So everybody's invited. It's March 14th at noon, and it's also on our website, and I can also drop a link in.
Was that May 14th?
It was May 14th. Thank you. It's
Been
next
a
week.
long day. Yes, thank you. And then, and finally, we invite you back for next month, which is, I think, June 1st. Yes, June 1st at 6 o'clock. We're going to look at the parent and community survey results. We put out a survey every 2 years, and we just got those results back in. So Em, who's not on tonight, will share that presentation. And then our goal is to have some youth panelists is our hope, that can kind of that we can ask questions of as it relates to that information, some youth and actually a few others. So that way, as we review that information. I think it's so important to bring in that youth voice and, are they experiencing things the way we think that they're experiencing things? One of the things we find when we kind of look at that data is that, perceptions versus realities, there's a much higher perception of youth use than is actually occurring in many instances. And this happens, we find this happens through the age group. So it happens, when Brian does the refusal skills and, he's talking with the 6th and 7th, 8th graders, and they think that the next age group up is using at a much higher. Often they guess 60 to 80%. Some of them even guessing 100% of youth are using. And we know it's much, much lower than that, thankfully. And then when you talk to college students about peer use, they always, overestimate the amount of peers that are using, and this has been replicated again and again through science. And then also when you ask adults, about youth use, they also overestimate. So, we know that perception sometimes informs our reality. And so, the reality is that our youth have great futures and they want to, excel in life. And so we need to do everything we can to support and enable their goals and dreams. So thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you to Green Mountain Public Access for recording our meeting. And we will share that out with the notes or with the slides. So those who weren't able to be here, because we do recognize that there were a lot of conflicts tonight, more than on most First Tuesdays. So have a great week and feel free to reach out to us at any time. Thanks.